The second I stepped out of my car in the parking area of that beachfront estate in the Hamptons, I heard it. My father, Ralph, leaning toward his old friends with a smirk, his voice carrying just far enough on the salty evening breeze. "Look at that. The dirty country bumpkin actually showed up." My mother, Thelma, chuckled beside him, adding something about how I didn't fit the vibe at all. They didn't even glance my way, like I was some insignificant embarrassment who'd wandered in from the wrong side of the tracks to ruin their perfect evening. What they didn't know, what nobody in that glowing, luxurious setup knew, was that I had signed the deed to this entire estate 3 years ago. This beachfront property in the Hamptons, the flagship of my East Coast luxury summer estates chain. Every string of white lanterns swaying in the wind, every elegantly set table on the private beach, every inch of pristine sand under their expensive shoes, it all belonged to me. And by the end of tonight, those whispered insults were going to cost them everything they thought they had. My name is Lisa Vargas. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a tiny town in Texas where the biggest event was the annual county fair. I left home young and never really looked back. Not because I hated it, but because my family made it clear I was the disappointment, the rough draft next to my younger sister, the perfect one who could do no wrong. Everything I did was compared to her, and I always fell short. So, I built my own life from nothing, and I kept quiet about it. People underestimate you when you let them, and sometimes that's your greatest advantage. Tonight, I'd been invited to my sister's wedding last minute, of course, probably out of some guilty obligation. I almost didn't come, but something drew me here. Curiosity, maybe. Or that stubborn part of me that wanted to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. I stood there in my old jeans and worn boots, ready for whatever came next. And trust me, what was coming would turn their whole world upside down. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single comment, and it truly means the world to me. Helps me keep sharing these stories with you. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get back to what happened next. I walked slowly along the stone path leading to the main party area, letting the sea breeze tug at my hair as memories flooded back. Memories I'd spent years trying to outrun. At 19, I left that small Texas town with nothing but an old suitcase and a bus ticket to Florida. No tearful goodbyes, no promises to stay in touch. My family had made it clear long ago that I didn't quite measure up, so I figured I'd stop trying to fit where I never belonged. I landed a job waiting tables at a modest beachside resort down in the Panhandle. The work was grueling. Endless shifts on my feet, clearing plates, wiping down tables, dealing with demanding guests who treated staff like background noise. But I paid attention. I watched how the managers handled bookings, how they negotiated with suppliers, how they turned a good season into profit. Nights off, I'd study online courses on real estate and hospitality, scribbling notes under a cheap desk lamp in my tiny rented room. Every tip went into savings. No splurges, no weekends out. By 26, I'd scraped together enough for a down payment on a rundown coastal property, a small lot with an old house that needed serious work. I renovated it myself on weekends, learning as I went, turning it into a rental estate for summer vacationers. Guests started coming back year after year, leaving glowing reviews, recommending it to friends. Word spread quietly in the right circles. One property became 2, then 4. I reinvested every dollar, focused on high-end summer rentals along the East Coast, places where wealthy families wanted privacy, ocean views, and that exclusive feel without the hotel crowds. Now my company owns a chain of luxury summer estates stretching from the Carolinas up to Maine. They're booked solid seasons in advance, generating more than I ever dreamed possible back when I was scrubbing tables. But I never told my family any of it. They still picture me scraping by, maybe in some cramped apartment, barely making rent. And honestly, I let them.
It was easier that way.
For the past 8 years, though, I've been sending money home anonymously through the company accounts. Enough to cover the remaining mortgage on my parents' house in Texas, the rising utility bills, the roof repairs after that bad storm, even some medical costs when Dad needed physical therapy. Never signed, never explained, just steady transfers arriving like clockwork. They assumed it was Ryder. Of course they did. My younger sister had always been the star, the one with the flashy social media presence, posting about her freelance PR gigs, hinting at big clients and exciting projects without ever naming names. It sounded impressive enough, especially to folks back home who didn't dig deeper. And my parents wanted to believe it. Bragging about Ryder's success made them look good in their small circle, proved they'd raised at least one child who made it. The truth, Ryder's income was sporadic at best, mostly small contracts and a lot of networking events, but the money kept coming, so the story stuck. 2 weeks ago, an invitation arrived in the mail for Ryder's wedding. Thick cream cardstock, elegant script, the kind of thing that screams money. It felt like an afterthought. Probably my mother's idea. A box to check for appearances. Family should be there, she'd say to her friends. I almost tossed it. Why put myself through another evening of subtle digs and comparisons? But something nagged at me. Maybe it was curiosity about this groom I'd never met, or wondering if time had softened anything back home, or perhaps that stubborn streak that refused to let them think I'd vanished completely. So I cleared my schedule, closed up the main office, and drove. The route from our headquarters near New York down to the Hamptons wasn't too brutal, but I took it slow, stretching it into an overnight trip. Stopped at quiet roadside spots to watch the waves under moonlight. Grabbed coffee at all-night diners. Let the road quiet the noise in my head. Questions circled the whole way. Would they even notice I was there? Would Ryder gloat about her perfect life? And this Hudson guy, what kind of man was marrying into that dynamic? By the time I pulled into the estate's private lot, dawn had long given way to evening lights, and the party was already in full swing. I parked, took a deep breath of that familiar salt air, and stepped out, ready for whatever waited inside. The party unfolded across the private beach in a way that screamed curated elegance. Long tables covered in crisp linens, piled high with platters of just shucked oysters glistening on crushed ice, whole lobsters arranged in neat rows, and bowls of chilled shrimp cocktail catching the light from overhead strings of bulbs. Servers circulated with trays of white wine kept perfectly cold, pouring into stemmed glasses that reflected the soft glow. The acoustic band near the shoreline strummed easy melodies, their sound blending seamlessly with the constant hush of waves rolling in. My parents noticed me right away as I moved deeper into the setup. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly at my casual jeans and shirt, his disapproval clear even from a distance. Mom turned to the group of friends clustered around her, murmuring something low that drew quiet laughs and knowing glances in my direction. It was their usual way, never direct confrontation, just enough to remind me I stood out for all the wrong reasons. Ryder glowed at the heart of everything, her white dress catching the breeze as she laughed with guests, linked arm in arm with Hudson Ratcliffe, the groom, who'd seemed so polished in the few photos I'd seen. Hudson spotted me approaching and offered a brief handshake, his grip firm and his smile practiced. Glad you could join us, he said, but his gaze swept over my outfit quickly, as if cataloging the difference between me and everyone else. I nodded politely and eased toward the bar area for a moment of space, the crowd's chatter washing over me like background noise. That's where Madison Brooks found me, my middle sister, the one who'd always hovered between Ryder's spotlight and my shadow. We'd confided in each other during those late-night calls when I was first starting out, and she was the only family member who'd ever known the full scope of what I was building. She slipped in beside me, giving a quick, warm squeeze to my arm. You doing all right? It's a lot, seeing them fawn over Ryder like this. Hasn't changed a thing. Her concern felt genuine, a rare anchor in the evening. We stood there quietly for a bit, watching the flow of guests, toasts raised, photos snapped, stories exchanged about summer plans and mutual connections. While refilling my glass with sparkling water, I ended up close to a shaded service hallway leading back toward the kitchens. Bertram Ratcliffe, Hudson's father, a heavy-set man with a booming laugh he used often, was off to the side, phone pressed to his ear, voice dropped low but carrying in the relative quiet. He paced a few steps, stressing the need for this wedding to extend our runway a little longer, and how the consistent inflows from the Vargas household were keeping things afloat for now. I stayed just long enough to register the strain beneath his words, the way he scanned the area before ending the call. Earlier, I'd caught fragments of conversation among my own staff, mentions of the Ratcliffe party suddenly requesting reductions in certain premium add-ons, like trimming the dessert station or limiting the open bar duration, changes that came after everything was already locked in. Bertram also grew visibly edgy whenever vendors brought up final payments or transfer confirmations, deflecting with promises of immediate resolution. Celeste spent much of the time at his elbow, her fingers frequently brushing against the heavy jewelry she wore, adjusting clasps or chains in small, repetitive motions. These observations accumulated gradually. The cost-cutting from people presenting unlimited wealth, the anxious phone habits, the reliance on unverified family resources. Nothing overt, but the pattern emerged steadily, the kind of discrepancies that raised alarms for anyone who'd navigated high-stakes hospitality deals. The unease built into something more concrete, a recognition that this wasn't just whetting nerves or typical in-law posturing. Hudson guided Ryder and me away from the main crowd to a quieter corner near the outdoor bar, calling it a casual family moment before the night ramped up. He carried himself with that easy assurance, the sort honed from navigating rooms full of potential investors. Our family has handled plenty of significant deals in the luxury vacation property space, he said, his voice level but pointed. High-value transactions that require discretion and alignment from everyone involved. He paused, holding my gaze steadily. It would be a shame if something threw off Ryder's perfect evening, don't you think? Ryder squeezed his arm affectionately, her eyes sparkling with complete trust, missing the subtle warning entirely. I offered a neutral smile and a soft agreement, giving nothing away. As they moved on to greet more guests, I lingered in the background, letting the pieces settle. Bertram's habit of checking his phone had become more frequent, his jaw tightening briefly each time before he smoothed it over with a laugh for approaching well-wishers. Celeste rarely strayed far, her hand often drifting to adjust that elaborate necklace, fingers lingering on the stones as if confirming they hadn't disappeared. Ryder circulated effortlessly, introducing Hudson with glowing pride, mentioning her future in-law's extensive holdings in premium coastal developments, the kind that generated serious passive income. She delivered it with such unfiltered joy, convinced this union secured the future she'd been raised to expect. My parents hovered nearby, engaging their longtime acquaintances with satisfied nods, sharing how their youngest daughter was joining a family with genuine financial depth, one that understood real estate at the highest levels. Dad stressed the reliability. Mom echoed the sentiment, both reveling in the social upgrade it implied for them. These elements layered on top of everything else, the abrupt scaling back on contracted extras, the overheard urgency about timing, the boasting that stayed just vague enough to avoid scrutiny. It formed a picture that experience had taught me to recognize: smoke where there shouldn't be any. The inconsistencies weren't screaming. They whispered, persistent and growing louder the more I listened. I stepped aside briefly, pulling out my phone to send a concise follow-up to Jasper Quinn, my trusted general manager, who'd proven invaluable spotting potential pitfalls in the industry over the years. Dig deeper on Ratcliffe connections. Any red flags in recent developments or partnerships? While awaiting details, I wandered back toward the water's edge, the party's glow fading behind me as waves provided a steady rhythm. The cool air cleared some of the immediate frustration, sharpening focus on what mattered most, protecting the company I'd built independently, free from their expectations or involvement. The resentment from years of being sidelined resurfaced, but channeled now into resolve. Whatever scheme was unfolding, it threatened assets earned through solitary grind, not handed over or shared. Jasper's response arrived promptly, outlining preliminary findings that aligned with my suspicions. Ivy Morales followed up almost immediately, her call confirming the gravity from legal channels. The Ratcliffes operated a classic Ponzi in upscale resort shares, selling stakes and promised exclusive properties, using incoming funds to pay returns to earlier participants while pocketing the rest. They'd executed similar operations starting in Florida, expanding cautiously to avoid early detection. Hudson was Garrett Sinclair in reality, the central figure from a prior collapsed venture that ruined multiple investors. Federal authorities had them under active investigation, compiling evidence methodically for airtight charges. The Vargas household's consistent influx stood out prominently, painting a picture of hidden wealth that made the marriage an ideal anchor for their endgame. My anonymous support over 8 years had inadvertently supplied the lore. Parents attributing it to Ryder's achievements, amplifying the facade these fraudsters exploited. The irony cut deep, but emotion gave way to calculation. I'd forward corroborating records tonight, internal traces only accessible to me, to accelerate closure and secure my interests. Family fallout, they'd face it alone. Consequence of prioritizing appearance over reality, favoritism over fairness. I authorized the shares, stepping back toward the festivities with decisions locked in. My phone buzzed in my pocket while I was still facing the dark ocean, the screen lighting up with Jasper Quinn's secure message. First, he had attached a preliminary report pulled from his private network of industry contacts, notes he'd kept on the Ratcliffe name from a few years back when it popped up on watch lists for questionable resort development promotions. The updated entries from reliable sources in banking and real estate circles painted a troubling picture. Sudden shifts in project funding, investor pullouts. Patterns of overpromise that never materialized. I scanned the details under the faint glow, heart rate steady, but mind racing through implications. Before I could process it fully, Ivy Morales called, my longtime attorney who'd handled every major contract, every expansion since the early days. She skipped pleasantries, her voice professional and urgent as she cross-referenced what Jasper sent with her own channels in regulatory and legal databases. The Ratcliffes weren't just aggressive developers. They were running a full Ponzi operation focused on luxury vacation properties. They'd pitch exclusive fractional ownership in prime coastal resorts, promising high rental yields and appreciation based on fabricated demand. Initial participants received returns to generate buzz and referrals, paid entirely from capital contributed by newer marks. No actual developments progressed far enough to sustain it. Money in, payouts out, principals skimming heavily along the way. They'd started small in Florida, targeting retirees and second home buyers looking for passive income, then scaled cautiously to neighboring states, rebranding projects to evade early complaints. Victims lost life savings when the flow slowed, left with worthless deeds to undeveloped land or non-existent shares. Hudson Ratcliffe was a fabricated identity. Records traced him to Garrett Sinclair, the primary operator in a prior scheme that collapsed spectacularly, wiping out dozens of investors before he vanished and resurfaced with new partners. Bertram and Celeste playing supportive roles to lend credibility. Federal investigators had opened a case months ago, building it methodically with wiretaps, subpoenaed bank records, cooperating witnesses from earlier victims. They were close to unsealing indictments, gathering the last threads for multi-count charges on wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. The Vargas family flagged prominently in their files. Those regular, substantial transfers hitting my parents' accounts, steady, unexplained from the outside, created the appearance of significant hidden wealth. Perfect target for the Ratcliffes to pursue through marriage, either to access funds directly or use the connection as temporary cover while preparing escape. Ivy confirmed the mechanics. Coldly anonymous corporate deposits routed cleanly. No red flags on the sending side, but the receiving pattern screamed source of funds inquiry in any serious probe. The full scope landed like ice water. Every transfer I'd authorized over 8 years. Quietly covering the house note after Dad's job loss, the unexpected hospital stays, the vehicle replacements, all of it to prevent outright crisis without seeking thanks or acknowledgement, had constructed the exact illusion these fraudsters needed. My parents embraced the narrative that Ryder provided it all, fueling their pride and broadcasting it widely enough to reach the wrong ears. The sacrifices made in isolation, the opportunities passed to pour resources back home, twisted now into bait for a con that could taint everything I'd built legitimately. No room left for conflicted feelings. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It risked professional fallout, regulatory scrutiny, reputational damage, potential freezes on assets if linked incorrectly. Decision crystallized without hesitation. I'd supply the missing links tonight. Internal routing logs, transfer histories only I controlled, to expedite federal action and ring-fence my company completely. But extending protection to my parents or Ryder, absorbing consequences for their willful blindness, the favoritism that elevated appearance over substance, no. They chased the glow of perceived success, ignored reality for convenience. The humiliation, financial ruin, legal entanglements ahead, they owned that fully. I texted approvals to Jasper for deeper dives if needed, then authorized Ivy to forward curated evidence packages directly to her established contacts in the investigative team. Process accelerated. Irreversible. The mechanics clicked into place smoothly. Years of building clean operations paying off in moments like this. I pocketed the phone and turned back toward the lighted party, steps measured against the sand. Music drifted faintly. Laughter continued unabated. Guests remained oblivious to the shift happening just outside their circle. Resolve settled firmly now. No second thoughts, no softening. The night would end differently than anyone expected, and I'd ensure my path stayed clear. I headed toward the staff area behind the main setup where Jasper Quinn was already on site, handling routine oversight for the evening. He'd made it a habit to check in personally for big events at flagship properties, ensuring every detail ran smoothly. He looked up from his tablet when I approached, his expression shifting to quiet concern as he read my face. We stepped into a small service corridor away from passing servers, the muffled party sounds filtering through. You and Ivy sent. I need them loaded onto the main AV system, I said evenly, ready to override the current display on my signal. Make it seamless. No announcements. Jasper nodded without questions, fingers already moving across his screen to coordinate with the tech team. He'd seen enough over the years to trust my judgment when it came this serious. My phone lit up with a message from Ivy Morales confirming transmission complete. She'd packaged the transfer logs and supporting docs, routing them directly to the lead agent on the Radcliffe investigation. The team had been monitoring remotely for weeks, positioned nearby tonight as part of standard protocol for high-profile targets. They'd move the moment public exposure provided clear probable cause. Everything aligned precisely, no loose ends. With the cake cutting approaching, the schedule's centerpiece after formal toasts, I scanned the crowd for Madison. She was near the edge of the lighted area, sipping a drink and watching the festivities with that familiar, detached expression. I caught her eye and tilted my head toward the wooden fence line overlooking the water. She followed without hesitation, the two of us slipping away from the bright tables to a spot where waves provided natural cover for conversation. Once we were alone, I kept it brief, outlining the Ponzi structure, Hudson's real identity, the federal surveillance, and how our family's financial trail had drawn them in. Madison listened intently, color draining slightly as the scope sank in. She didn't interrupt, just absorbed it all. The deception, the risk, the years of misplaced credit. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. I always suspected something felt off with this rush to marry. But this... She shook her head, then met my eyes firmly. You're doing the right thing. You've carried enough for all of us. Time to protect what you've earned. Her support landed solidly. No hesitation or plea to reconsider for family's sake. It reinforced the clarity I'd reached. We stood there a moment longer, the distant music and laughter contrasting sharply with the conversation's weight. I gave her a small nod of thanks before heading back into the glow of the party. Ryder was center stage now, posing for photos with Hudson, her smile wide and genuine as ever. My parents flanked them proudly, directing the photographer for group shots with the Radcliffes, beaming like this alliance sealed some long-held dream. Guests clustered around, raising glasses in informal cheers, sharing stories about past Hampton seasons and future plans. The energy remained high, carefree, the perfect facade before the shift. I positioned myself near the edge of the main area, close enough to signal when ready, far enough to observe without drawing attention. The multi-tiered cake waited on its stand, decorated elegantly with fresh flowers matching Ryder's bouquet. Servers prepped for the ceremonial push to center stage. Anticipation built naturally among the crowd, Phones coming out for videos, applause ready. My pulse stayed even, focus absolute. The mechanism was set, timing perfect. Cold determination filled every breath. No doubts, no softening. Consequences would unfold exactly as they should. The multi-tiered cake emerged from the side tent on its rolling stand, pushed by servers to the center of the open-air stage area amid enthusiastic applause. Fresh flowers cascaded down the sides, matching Ryder's bouquet perfectly, candles flickering softly in the breeze. The band shifted seamlessly into a romantic instrumental, building the moment everyone had waited for. Bertram Ratcliffe stepped forward confidently, accepting the microphone from the DJ with a broad smile. He raised his glass, voice booming warmly over the crowd. To a perfect union, two families coming together in prosperity, strength, and a bright future ahead. We've built solid foundations, and tonight we celebrate joining them for generations to come. Guests lifted their drinks in agreement, cheers starting to rise. Then the large screen behind him, previously cycling through couple photos, flickered once and changed. Court filings from Florida appeared first, official seals visible, listing charges from a prior investigation. Next, older photos of Hudson side by side with images under the name Garrett Sinclair. Financial summaries followed, mapping fund flows in classic Ponzi patterns. Federal surveillance authorizations closed the sequence, dates and signatures clear. The applause died instantly. A hush fell, broken only by confused murmurs as people leaned forward, squinting to make sense of it. Bertram's face froze mid-toast, glass still raised. He turned toward the screen, color draining. Agents in plain suits entered from both sides of the beach setup, badges flashing under the lights as they moved decisively. Federal agents, one announced calmly but firmly. Bertram Ratcliffe, Celeste Ratcliffe, Garrett Sinclair, you are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. Cuffs clicked into place efficiently. Bertram stammered protests about mistakes. Celeste gasped and clutched at him. Hudson, Garrett, tried backing away but found his path blocked. Ryder stood rooted beside the cake, knife in hand forgotten, her expression shifting from confusion to denial. This can't. This is wrong. She whispered at first, then louder, shaking her head as reality crashed in. She sank into a nearby chair, the joy evaporating into blank shock. My parents pushed through the stunned guests toward the stage, faces pale with panic. Dad reached out desperately. Do something. Fix this. Mom echoed, voice cracking. You're the one with money now. Help us save your sister. No apologies, no questions about how or why, just demands for rescue, as if obligation trumped everything. I walked forward through the parting crowd, boots steady on the sand. Jasper handed me the microphone without a word. The beach really waited in tense silence. Good evening, I said clearly, voice carrying over the waves. I'm sorry for the interruption, but there's information everyone here deserves to know. I gestured to the screen, still displaying the evidence. The Ratcliffe family has been operating a Ponzi scheme targeting vacation property investments. Hudson Ratcliffe is actually Garrett Sinclair, with a history of similar frauds. I paused for the weight to land. And this estate, the entire venue tonight, is part of my chain of luxury summer properties. I own it, along with the others up and down the East Coast. Gasps rippled through. For 8 years, I've been the one sending money home to Texas, the mortgage payments, bills, repairs. Not Ryder. Me anonymously, because that's how it's always been. Ryder looked up from her chair, eyes wide with fresh betrayal. My parents stood frozen, mouths open but silent. I won't be continuing that support. I continued. Any of it. Family ties end here, completely, permanently. No more help, no contact. I set the microphone down, turned, and walked away through the crowd that parted without resistance. Behind me, Ryder's sobs started, mixed with my parents' frantic pleas fading into the night air. I didn't look back. Months later, the Ratcliffe family faced formal federal indictments on multiple counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, the works. Prosecutors seized what assets remained, liquidating them to provide partial restitution to victims scattered across several states. Bertram, Celeste, and Garrett Sinclair awaited trial in pretrial detention, their bail requests denied due to flight risk. Back in Texas, the house my parents had lived in for decades went into foreclosure once the anonymous payment stopped. The bank moved quickly, forcing a distressed sale at well below market value. Dad and Mom ended up in a small rental apartment on the outskirts of town, the kind with thin walls and shared laundry. Their old social circle evaporated. Invitations dried up. Former friends crossed the street to avoid awkward conversations about the scandal that splashed across local news for weeks. Ryder canceled the wedding officially through a brief public statement citing unforeseen circumstances. Her vague PR contracts vanished almost overnight. Clients distanced themselves from the association, leaving her without steady work. The isolation hit hard. She withdrew from social media, stopped attending events, spent days in a fog of emptiness as people she'd considered close quietly backed away. Madison Brooks made her choice clear early on. She reached out the day after the wedding fallout, offering unwavering support without judgment. We started talking regularly, phone calls that stretched late, catching up on years of distance. She visited the Hamptons a few times, staying in one of the guest suites, and we walked the beach, discussing everything from business plans to the family dynamics we'd both navigated differently. Eventually, she cut contact with our parents and Ryder too, unable to reconcile their long-standing favoritism with the damage it caused. The business, meanwhile, thrived in ways I hadn't anticipated. Word of the event spread through industry channels, not as gossip, but as proof of integrity. Investors and partners appreciated the clean break from any potential taint. Bookings surged for the upcoming seasons. I closed deals on 2 new properties, one in Maine with stunning rocky coastline views, another in Rhode Island offering historic charm updated for modern luxury. The chain grew stronger, reputation enhanced by transparency and solid operations. Life at the Hamptons estate settled into a quiet rhythm. I cherished mornings reviewing expansion projections, afternoons walking the grounds or meeting with staff about guest experiences, evenings watching sunsets from the deck without interruptions. Looking back on it all, the lesson stands out sharply. Favoring one child while diminishing another, chasing the illusion of status and wealth without questioning its source, it exacts a heavy toll. My parents lost their home, their standing, their daughter's respect. Ryder lost the future she'd been promised. The Radcliffes lost freedom and everything they stole. People will always try to judge you by where you started or how you appear on the surface. Let them. While they're busy looking down, you build something real, something lasting. In the end, true success isn't about proving them wrong with a dramatic moment. It's about walking away, knowing you created your path on your own terms, free from their limitations. And that's worth more than any apology or reconciliation they might offer too late.